The year 2001 was the year of the snake in China, and the country's State Postal Bureau published a series of stamps bearing patterns of 7 snakes to celebrate the first year of the new millennium. However, the Bureau was sued by a farm wife named Bai Shoa from Yancheng, northwest China's Shanxi province. Immediately following the stamp's publishing, Bai claimed the pattern of a coiling snake on one of the stamps was copied from a paper-cut work of hers. Since Bai learned the pattern from the elder members of her family, who in turn learned it from their ancestors, the lawsuit might trigger a tangled warfare on the intellectual property rights of Chinese folk artworks if such patterns are owned by individuals. It was not until then that people came to realize the art of paper cutting, which seemed to have been largely forgotten, was an inseparable part of their lives. Paper cut style patterns are seen everywhere, from colored drawings on building structures, wood carvings, to ceramics, printing, and traditional cloth dyeing. With scissors, the Chinese documented their history, lives, and feelings. The folk art paper cutting is a Chinese tradition. Paper cutting was a most popular folk art form in China because of its low cost and great decorative effect. The northern plateau of northwest China's Shanxi province has been China's most famous area for paper cuts. The plateau lies about 350 kilometers north of Xi'an, the provincial capital. Besides paper cutting, folk songs and folk Yang'e dance also prosper on the plateau. Paper cuts recorded the history of Chinese ancestors' reproduction worship, totems worship to deities, and ghost worship. They help us trace the evolution of the nation's aesthetic heritage. The origin of paper cutting dates back to the 6th century BC, according to archaeological finds. But researchers believe practices of the folk art had started much earlier. Since the 5th century BC, the Chinese have been making ornamental engravings and cuttings on gold and silver. The metal engravings are similar to paper cuts in the composition of patterns. The earliest paper-cut works discovered in China are the pieces unearthed at the Gaocheng site at Turpan, northwest China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, which date back to the 4th century AD. Paper cuts were then symbolic representations of the living, whose figures were cut and buried with the dead or burnt at the funeral. Detailed records of paper cutting have appeared in historical files since the 7th century. Today, paper cutting patterns found in Baishui, Shanxi province, which are made to call back the spirits of the dead, still retain the initial forms of paper cutting in its beginning form. Professional paper cutting artists appeared in the 10th century as skills of the craft improved. People used paper cuts to decorate windows, lamps, and gifts, and those with patterns of dragons and tigers were believed to have the power of expelling the devil. The leather silhouette, a derivative of the paper cut used in folk shadow plays, also became popular. Paper cutting has enhanced the development of the decorative art of Chinese ceramics and that of the printing and dyeing of textiles. Paper cuts were widely used in the production of ceramics in the Shizhou kilns of the Song dynasty. While glazing the ceramic bases, artists pasted paper cuts on them bearing such lively patterns as the phoenix and plum blossoms. The patterns were left on the porcelain after firing. The blue cloth printed with white patterns, which has been popular in China since the Song dynasty, is dyed with paper cuts pasted on the cloth. In the running horse lantern, which appeared in the 14th century, paper cutting patterns are sandwiched between thin gauze layers, and the patterns are projected on the outer layer of gauze when the lantern is lit. This shows that paper cutting was already an integral part of people's lives at that time. Paper cutting literally means cutting out patterns on paper with scissors and knives. The patterns are roughly classified into a dozen categories: human figures, birds and animals, writings, landscapes, and so on. Some were used as decorations, such as the pieces pasted up on the windows. Others are used as symbols of good luck and fortune, or serve as charms to keep out evil spirits, like those images of deities, which are pasted on the front door of a house. Scholars divide paper cuts into single color and multicolored. The former is cut with paper of one color. The artist folds a piece of paper before cutting it and gets a regular pattern when they unfold the paper. Sometimes they fold several pieces of paper together and get several works with the same pattern at one go. The latter is created with several pieces of paper with different colors, which were cut separately and pasted into one work, or with a piece of white paper which was cut into a designed pattern and then painted with various colors. Such paper cuts with variances in colors and compositions can better express the artist's feelings and wishes. The art of paper cutting has been handed down in two ways. One is through professional craftsmen who formalized and simplified the paper cuts and sold them in cities to make a living. The other is through rural women, especially those living in enclosed communities in mountains, who created paper cuts to show their aspirations and wisdom, and unconsciously to please men. It's like urban women choosing cosmetics and dresses. People would never think that the paper cutting is closely related to the love, pregnancy, and birth of the countrywomen. So, their paper cutting is full of natural significance. It is very clear for us to see the real position of the women in the society. These works make the contemporary arts more mysterious and confusing, with a strong vitality. The northern plateau of Shaanxi has one of the toughest natural environments in Asia. The local residents, challenged by the hostile nature, can survive only by increasing the reproduction rate. This finds expression in the local paper cutting. Patterns like baby catching a cock, carp playing with lotus, and baby in a lotus flower are all artistic expressions of reproduction worship. The local residents use the cock, fish, and jade tablet to symbolize the man's reproductive organ, and the diamond-shaped hole, lotus, and peony to symbolize the woman's. The ripe pomegranate, calabash, and pumpkin are metaphors of pregnancy, and such pictures as magpie on a plum tree, butterfly flirting with a flower, and fish playing with a lotus are metaphors of making love. In the dry, freezing winter of the plateau, every household has a piece of bright red paper cut pasted on its door, which gives a hint at sex. A common pattern is a mouse getting into a pumpkin, stealing its seeds. A mouse is a symbol of the man's reproductive organ, and a pumpkin is of a woman's uterus. The more seeds the mouse steals, the more children the couple will have. Another common pattern is of a baby catching a cock. A cock symbolizes a man's reproductive organ, and catching a cock means finding a man. Such plants and animals as the lotus and the mouse are metaphors of reproduction not only in paper cuts, but also in folk songs like those in the Book of Songs, which was compiled by intellectuals in the 10th century BC. This is paper cutting from northern Shaanxi, so imaginative. In the 1980s, researchers of folk arts gathered together some old, illiterate, and lily-footed farm wives from northern Shanxi. They gave the women paper, asked them to make whatever pattern out of the paper, following their own artistic instincts. The researchers then studied the meaning of the works thus done. One of the women, 80-year-old Kushulan, was extremely poor in real life, but she is the goddess in the paper-cutting world she created. Her masterpiece, titled Goddess of Paper Cutting, combined the image of a goddess with that of herself in her youth.
剪花子大娘这在外边，背着上海都去遍。有我这剪花么大娘么，有我这剪花子姑娘家。一把小剪子散出去，头子我剪花家。头子剪花时候看，剪下这幅画我西武丹，剪下这鱼儿老脸家，亲戚是花八宝我如意家。
是啊，
慢慢的，
The farm wife perhaps did not look like an artist at all, but her works were exhibited at the art gallery of the Central Academy of Fine Arts and entered into the collections of the National Art Museum of China and the Oriental Museum of France.
他这样的剪纸的风格呢，我还没看到别人这么样的。这个马，它用的呢不是一个自然形态的四条腿在往下边站着，或者是四条腿往前跑着，它不是的。他被这个马呢是作为天马一样的。我问他，他说这个马是从天上下来的，翻腾的这么翻滚下来的。那就说这个实际上是一个太阳在旋转，生生不息。这个十字呢，在中国的考古文化和民间文化里边都是作为太阳。十字的这个旋转就是万字，这个万字呢是生生不息的太阳，是一个旋转的宇宙。 这是一个带有哲学观念的，但是它为这个符号呢，很自然的、非常活龙活现的用在这个艺术形象里面，所以它这个马呢是一个万字的旋转，是一个旋转的图腾，带有哲学内涵的图腾。所以他的这个剪纸呢，可以这样说，我觉得他的剪纸应该是观念形态的哲学剪纸，而这个哲学呢。 既不是儒家的，又不是道家的，又不是其他古德百家的，而是中国本源哲学，所以我认为它是大师级的。
你这次展览的这么多作品啊，每一个作品都有一个你想象的那个意思，是吧？能不能把这个给我们讲一讲呢？
那个给你讲不上来，
讲不上来，怎么讲不上来呢？
不会讲，
都说不上来。
Their seemingly unconscious creations are actually a cultural reversion to the ancestors after a long process of evolution. We like to think the artworks are a special way for us to communicate with our ancestors. Where is the life from? Where is it going? This is the first question man asked himself and also the final one. Through collecting and studying Chinese paper cutting, we seem to hear faintly the various answers to the question given by people in the remote antiquity.